So in the main part of the episode, we are talking just generally about a topic that we talked about on a few episodes ago when we addressed the political protests in Sri Lanka and Argentina, and as well as the episode before that, the Dutch protests, the farmer protests. And now we have another one breaking out, this time in the Czech Republic, where they are protesting, basic rises in cost of living, government crackdowns from COVID, all of these are themes playing into...
It's a good thing we don't have that going on here.
Playing into the political protests all around the world is generally government either incompetence or corruption or any number of other malfeasance that has the people saying, we don't think that the current regime as it's going is working into our best interest. And that is kind of an obvious conclusion based on what governments have done both during COVID and then also and the response to COVID and then all of the supply chain inflation issues and all the stuff, the policy choices that came out of those things is we shouldn't be surprised at this continuing rise, even if you don't see it in the United States, because as we talked about then, the American media is not interested in you hearing about other less armed populations rising up against their government. They definitely don't want the American people knowing that. But we're saying that it's not that surprising.
Don't plug in your cars. You don't want to eat meat. It's gross. It's not that good for you. You're going to eat mostly bugs. You're
Cricket powder.
You're going to own nothing and like it. Be happier for it. Your general life will be less fulfilling, but guess what? You'll be entertained. And does this not sound like it's happening right now? Like, I don't want to sound like a doomsday clock kind of guy, but like, they said that there's going to be food shortages. And then they start making mandates that we can't make food. So was that the first thing the government's ever got right? But it seems like the government's getting it right because they're forcing it to be right. Like, climate change isn't that significant to push forward people not being able to eat, is it? Like, basic human rights, basically being able to live off of the streets, like being able to support yourself, being able to be your own thinker, being able to have your own education, being able to make decisions for yourself. Like, these are all general forms of freedom that we take for granted, but at the same time, it's all a hindrance to a government that wants you to turn to it for all of your needs, wants, and desires. So, Dane, I posit to you, is this the end times? Like, are they trying to go with the globalization thing, or are they really trying to help us, but they just don't know how to do it, so this is the way that they do it? Again, it goes back to that, are they evil or are they just fucking stupid? I don't know how to read this anymore, but all signs are pointing in a direction. I don't want to be tin hatty here, but it's like, I don't think they want to solve any of our problems. In fact, they want to make more of them for us.
Well, I think this is one of those situations where the stupid evil debate is coming down to a situation where it might be a 50-50 thing. And here's one example I'll give you. During the times of COVID, one thing that they universally agreed needed to happen was schools needed to be shut down, right? Now, that did two things. First of all, it forced kids to be home and learn remotely, which then allowed parents who were also forced to be home from work really get an inside track into the garbage that their kids are being taught in school. And that turned a lot of parents off. So when you see these situations of parents going to school board meetings nowadays and raising hell about what their kids are being taught and propagandized for and all that kind of stuff, that was a complete and utter unforced error on behalf of the state. And their overreaction and whipping up of hysteria of COVID in order to serve other means, like justify their mask mandates and mandatory vaccine policies and all that kind of stuff, then that they wanted to do, they went overboard and screwed up. Because they basically pulled the curtain back and showed parents all across the United States and the world that the propaganda that state schools are feeding kids is not something that parents support and deserve, and rightly so. But here's the other thing that they did in terms of the schooling thing is that, and we've talked about this on this podcast a lot, the public indoctrination system is the linchpin to the entire command and control regime that states all over the world want to cultivate. Because first of all, they want to teach kids to respect authority and don't think outside the box. Critically thinking is completely useless. Just take the damn test and get the score and we'll pass you, and then you can be a wage slave for the rest of your life.
And you'll be a good member of society.
Right? Don't ask questions. And, back to the old Jesuit saying, give me a boy before the age of 7 and I'll show you the man, right? That's exactly what public schooling is about, is infect the kids' minds to be state apologists and basically propagandists in their adult years on behalf of the state, right? These are the people who grow up to be Jennifer Lawrence or shudder at the thought of national divorce. That's exactly what the state wants. But it also gives them this sort of avenue to inject these ideas that keep us fighting against each other, right? So all the way down the line, the public indoctrination system is the linchpin to the state's entire apparatus because it raises uncritically thinking adults who don't question the system, go to work, punch a time card, and pay their taxes and die. And they potentially upended a significant portion of that system by overreacting to COVID. So was it stupid that they did that? Absolutely so. From their perspective of wanting to maintain control, the last thing you want to lose control of is education. Or, sorry, I misspoke, is indoctrination. You don't want to lose control of that narrative control that you have on kids from 5 all the way through college. But the other thing is you don't want to tip off the parents that you've been telling, just give us your kids, we'll raise them, we'll instill the values that make them good civil, public or good citizens, all that kind of stuff. You don't need to do that. Don't infect them with your values, parents. They cut themselves off at the knees. Now, was it evil what they did to kids in the time of COVID? Absolutely. It was absolutely evil, unquestionable. These politicians should be tried for crimes against humanity for what they did to children during COVID. But it was also stupid in terms of cutting off their nose to spite their face. So to answer your question more specifically and about all the civil unrest rising around that is just one microcosm of them overplaying their hand. And to use the Michael Collins reference again, they came down heavy-handed and overreacted so much that people are now starting to question everything the establishment has to say about anything. It's not just hashtag the science. It's everything. And now they have a problem on their hands that's leading to civil unrest all over the world at the same time.
Well, which leads me to my next point, which is a good point. Now that we have these people questioning everything that they're saying, we need to get more. Like, if you thought during that time, because we don't question the science, don't question them, they're doing the best that they can. Now they're starting to come out and say that, well, we might have rushed this. We might have known this. We aren't doing that. I'm not going to say names, but even Saint Fauci, the god of science himself, is saying that, well, we might have withheld the vaccines. And I might have said that mass vaccination was 70, but then I realized I could probably even get more than that. I said it was 80. His words, not mine. If that isn't enough, like, they're never going to come out and go, you know what, guys, we fucked up. We lied to you. We made a lot of money doing it. But we're really sorry. But hey, this is business, baby. This isn't America. This is business. So your health is tertiary to our financial gains, and your rights are only in the way of us making more money and getting elected again. So sorry, we fucked you over, but good luck with all the things that are going to happen to you over the next 75 years. None of us are going to get held accountable for it. And we'll see you on the next CNN or Fox News broadcast. No, they're never going to do that. But what you have to do is you have to have a memory, as Dane says, longer than a fucking goldfish or an IQ higher than room temperature, and start saying, like, okay, if you got burned during COVID, if you got your 20,000th fucking booster shot, no hate on you, but just learn. Learn now that maybe, just maybe, that apparatus that doesn't really give a fuck about you doesn't really give a fuck about you. They might actually have other agendas involved in their decision making than your best interests. And this is the learning teachable moment kind of thing, is that, like, yes, we just went through the biggest scare of our history, and that is probably the best thing for us. This is the biggest thing that has ever happened in our lifetimes, and possibly, I mean, aside from World War II, like the biggest thing that's happened since then. And in a time where we needed truth, honesty, and actual care for our fellow Americans from our top elites, they couldn't be bothered. When they're telling you that this is the most life-threatening thing that's ever happened, they were too busy worrying about whether or not they're going to make their profit margin that time or this year. And that's why they pushed you to do things and to do the things that you did. So hold them accountable. Again, to go back to the Epstein didn't kill himself in the culture corner, the people that don't get held accountable are always them, are always the people pulling the levers. And then they get all their little subordinates to muddy the waters and turn us against them. No one here started the propaganda that told you that you need 2 shots in your arm for my safety. They did that. Fauci did that. Biden did that. They did that. Now, I'm sure your neighbor told you that you needed to go do that. Don't hold them responsible. They thought that they were doing the right thing in that time. And if they're still doing it, let them come around eventually, but you're not going to fall for that anymore. They do not and will not, until we force them to, give a fuck about you. Period.
Well, I would go one step further. It's not only that they don't care about you, it's that they showed you that they have open disdain for you. They hate you. They hate the fact that you have different values, different opinions, different viewpoints on a whole range of things. Now, it was convenient for them to just target you for not following #TheScience, and they could cancel you and kick you off social media and do all of that kind of stuff.
They can't even define a woman, let alone define fucking science.
But now they want you to know that everything, even a difference in political opinion, right? Despite the fact that Jennifer Lawrence wants you to be political about everything, you're only supposed to be political in the way that she and the people that she approves of in the regime approve of. Even for stuff like that, they wanted you to know that they hate you. The trucker protests in Canada, fundamentally, what was that about? Why did they go to the Capitol? Why did they occupy the hill around Parliament? They told you. Thousands and thousands of people all had the same refrain. We want to talk to the political leaders that made policy X, Y, or Z, and we want to let them know that we're upset with that policy. That is a fundamental tenet of Western democracy, right? The idea to address your grievances with your government. That is fundamental to Western civilization, dating all the way back to Rome, right? And that's what they demanded. They demanded to talk to their politicians. And what did their politicians do? They didn't come out and talk to them. They called them just this side of Nazis and probably bigots and racists and all, everything that Canadian Castro called them, and, the rest of the people in his party echoed. They have utter disdain for you if you don't fall in line with what they have pre-approved.
Or January 6th, to tack on to that.
So, yeah, not only don't believe these people, but understand that they are fundamentally, and again, you being at odds with them is not your choice. They are at odds with you. You are just standing firm on whatever your values and principles are. You haven't changed. The world has changed, and it has changed against you. And even if you're a useful idiot like Kathy Griffin and you think that the ones that are currently pulling the levers of power are always going to be on your side and that you advocating for cracking down on the quote unquote other is never going to somehow work against you, have a little more foresight and a little bit more historical perspective to realize that that's probably not the case. And that to every ounce of power you give your side to crack down on them today, if it falls in the other hands, can be used against you tomorrow. You know, David's door analogy that he uses all the time on this podcast. So that's the direction it's going. That's why there's civil unrest around the world. That's why a couple months ago, we had former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, getting shot and killed. We had last week, I think former Vice President of Argentina was going to get shot at, but fortunately for her, the gun didn't fire. You know, this kind of stuff is going to keep escalating because the governments around the world are not listening to their people. And not only are they not listening, they are signaling to them on a daily basis that they hate them. The governments and the people in power hate the people that they rule over. And they're playing with fire. And that fire is starting to burn them, sometimes very specifically in the case of Abe. That's not cheerleading it. That's saying what the facts on the ground are. That is acknowledging reality for what it is. So, you know, there's no government politicians or other than the NSA or any bureaucrats listening to this podcast, but we would tell you to run this up the chain of command. Tread lightly because you are acting like the grasshoppers in a bug's life. There's a lot more of us than there are of you. Maybe start working together as opposed to treating us like your mortal enemies.
I like the analogy. And to use that playful analogy and sugarcoat that jagged little pill you just tried to shove down their throat. I think this is actually a good moment because now we're on the back end of it. We're on the back end of it now. We can see the forest for the trees now, and we can see what really happened. And now is the time where you can go, oh, shit. I didn't see it because I was so scared and I was trying to do what I thought was right as an American by taking my shot, by doing this, by staying home, by doing this. But then I realized that now I'm more in control of them, that I followed all their mandates. And now my life looks completely different than what it did before I went in. And there's a good chance that they knew that this thing wasn't what they were saying it was. Maybe not the first 6 months, but definitely after that. So they might have turned against me and used all of my fear, which is a common practice, and against me, and maybe do things that I wouldn't necessarily have done otherwise, other than a huge pandemic situation, life or death situation that they made it sound like. And now from here on out, I'll be wiser. I'll question things. I'll be a little slower to jump to my conclusions. And maybe I'll start making sense of this world and start holding them accountable instead of my neighbors accountable for what they do to me, for what the Capitol Hill does to me, not my neighbors. But I can only hope.
I couldn't agree more.
But all that being said, Dane,
we hope that cooler heads prevail.
Yep.
For all of us.
We're a peaceful podcast.
Yeah, because although, David and I aren't exactly the Jocko Willenick types in terms of like having seen and dealt with that kind of stuff directly enough to know that it's not something that we want, we're not cheerleading for. We understand the point that he's trying to make when he says stuff like that. You know, like those who have seen a fight are not asking for a fight. You know, it doesn't have to go that way. And
none of us want that. None of us want that.
But the more and more the whole F-15 versus AR-15, and if you don't vote for my side, you're asking for civil war, and that sort of general mentality. If Donald Trump would have said that, your buttholes would have cinched so tight we would have heard it across the world. It would have been a collective. That rhetoric just needs to tone down. Because again, you don't want that to become a reality. You just don't.
None of us do.
Nobody does. So, to any extent that our megaphone, as small as it is at this point, hopefully bigger in the future.
109th Australian podcast.
Hey, there we go.
Political.
To any extent that
Making
our
this
little
shit up.
megaphone can add to the discussion to let the cooler heads prevail, I feel like we have done our civic duty.